Hello, and welcome to a new podcast that I am starting here on March 10th of the year 2016. I'm Ethan Edelhart, and I'll be your host. So this podcast will revolve mainly around politics and current events, such as the current election and various other news stories that happen to pop up during the course of this podcast. The main goal of doing this show is to provide commentary in a more informal setting about politics and to get others engaged in politics who normally wouldn't find it very interesting. I hope that this podcast grows, and I hope that people will join me as guests so that it won't just be a one-sided viewpoint into politics, but rather a multidimensional way to look at how politics is in this country. So for this first episode, I'm just going to talk mainly about the 2016 election cycle and what is going on as of today with the standings. So first, I'll give a brief rundown of how the main candidates for each party stand. So on the Republican side, the four main candidates we have right now are Trump, Donald Trump, Cruz, Ted Cruz, Rubio, and Marco Rubio, and John Kasich. And so currently, Trump is leading with 458 total delegates. Cruz is close behind with 359. Rubio is at 151, and Kasich is at 54. Now, all these numbers are as of March 10th, the morning of March 10th, so they're sure to grow here in the near future. So in order to be guaranteed the nomination for their party, one of these nominees or one of these candidates needs to get a total of 1,237 delegates, and that is with 1,485 remaining. So, as it stands at this point in time, Trump is leading, despite a lot of people questioning how that is to be and how that is so. Many people cite his outrageous viewpoints and the fact that he is so staunch in his beliefs and just frankly crazy in the sense that he is just so opinionated and so vile in what he says that it doesn't seem that he should have the popularity that he does. Similarly, Cruz takes a very opinionated standpoint, although he doesn't seem to have the popular support that Donald Trump has garnered at this point. As for Rubio and Kasich, they are both they're more moderate, although they are definitely trying to band together and be a bit more racy, with Rubio making disparaging comments about Trump in the recent days. And so for the Democratic side, let's just talk about that briefly. With superdelegates included, we have Clinton at 1,223 delegates, and Clinton being Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders, being at 574. Without superdelegates, those numbers are around 715 for Clinton and 519 for Sanders. And sorry if I glance over in the direction that I am, it's just because I'm looking at my notes. Don't mind me. And so each of them, or either of them, needs to get 2,383 in order to gain the Democratic nomination for presidency. And that is with 2,968 delegates available. So a lot of people look at these numbers and they see that Clinton is so far ahead of Bernie, that it's almost impossible for him to catch up. But that is with superdelegates included. When you just look at the normal guaranteed delegates, it's actually a much closer race. And with Sanders getting these recent wins, despite popular belief being that he can't win in certain states, it's seeming more likely that he's gaining support. Now, will Clinton get the nomination? It is more than likely because she is far more supported in the general public, and people are more used to her viewpoints than they are with Bernie's more left, super socialist, super different way of looking at things. So, on March 12th of this year, in 2 days, we have five primaries in 5 different states. Those will be in Florida, Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio. Well, all these states are incredibly important for both the Republicans and the Democrats. The three to note, at least for the Democratic side, are Florida, Illinois, and Ohio. Those are going to be very, very highly contested, and it's possible that we'll see an upset by the way of Sanders. And the reason why it's important to focus on those three states in particular is because they hold the most delegates for the Democratic side. So if Sanders is able to pick up the win in at least two of the states, he gains a massive, massive edge. And he gets even closer to where Clinton is at this point. As for the Republicans, it's going to be a bloodbath. Rubio is going to do everything in his power to win Florida because it keeps him in a race that he should be losing. Whereas Kasich, it's surprising that Kasich has not dropped out at this point. He has done well enough for himself, and from a more moderate perspective, he seems to be getting a lot of support, but there aren't enough moderate perspectives so that he can gain the entire popular opinion of the country. Okay. So one thing that has come up in a lot of conversations I've had is, why is Bernie Sanders so far behind in the polls? And so I think there are two main reasons for this. I think the first is that people are more familiar with Hillary Clinton and therefore they're more comfortable with her. People are unwilling to change if they don't see a problem. And so a lot of people don't see anything wrong with Hillary's way of approaching politics. They don't see that there's a negative. And well, I don't think there are too many outrageous negatives. I think there are some that people are not noticing on a regular basis. Whereas with Sanders, he has called himself a socialist, and he has taken very, very purposeful viewpoints that Americans as a whole are uncomfortable with. So the reason why it's important to note that he has called himself a socialist is that since the Cold War, since even before the Cold War, America has been very uncomfortable with the idea of communism or socialism. So for him to identify himself in that way alienates him from a large part of the population who is still not willing to side with somebody who is a socialist. So I think that is one of the main reasons why Sanders is having so much trouble catching up to Clinton in the race. But it's more than likely that he'll at least get close, if not surpass her, in these coming months. And so the big question right now is, who is the best candidate? And so from my slightly biased perspective, where I've grown up in a liberal household and where I kind of see things from a different light than those who are just supporting Trump or Cruz, I think Sanders is the best candidate, although that comes with a qualifier. I think that his ideas are the best. I think that they're the most positive for the nation. The idea of providing a single-payer healthcare system, it's worked very well in other countries. It's worked so well in the UK, and it's worked very well in Canada, that I think if it were applied to the United States, it'd be very difficult because we have so many more people than those two countries, or those two entities. But if it were applied well, it would be so positive for the nation as a whole. Another thing that he's brought up is free college for all, which is a very contentious issue because people are worried about how much their taxes are going to raise and how that's going to affect everyone as an individual. And so it was funny, in class today, in math class, I was finished with something I was doing. I was talking with another classmate and the teacher, and we were discussing this college issue, and the point was brought up that it's a beautiful idea if it works. And it's a beautiful idea once you figure out the boundaries, because what are the boundaries to the system? How is the system going to work in practice? What is going to be covered? Like, how much of college tuition is going to be covered by this? Because it can't be, oh, I will send everybody to have a Harvard level education. That just isn't viable in our society. There's too much cost to that it just doesn't work. So what are the limitations? That's one thing I want to find out from Sanders in the near future, so that I can better support his viewpoints and not have fear about how they're going to be applied in practice. So another thing that I was looking at while kind of researching stuff, I saw a poll from NBC and the Wall Street Journal. It was a joint poll, And it was just a positive negative poll rating. So they surveyed, I think it was 1,000 people, might have been more. I'm sorry, I don't have that. But they surveyed, let's say, 1,000 people about various candidates to get their general idea about how positive or negative these people are. And so as the ratings stand, Kasich was out in front with plus 19%. Sanders was in second with plus 7%. Rubio was at negative 11% in third. Clinton was fourth with negative 13%. Cruz was fifth at negative 18%. And Trump was last at negative 39%. Now, when you compare these poll ratings to their standings in terms of delegates, there's a very clear trend about how things stand. The more negative a candidate is, the more highly, the closer they are to reaching the nomination. And so I think this brings up a really good point about the success of Trump and the success of these outrageous candidates who are saying things that are so despicable, so vile, that they shouldn't ever be looked upon positively and looked upon as sources of good information, yet they are. And I think the problem is candidates like Trump draw upon the worst parts of society. They draw upon everybody's worst thoughts, and that's why Trump and Cruz are so popular. They're saying things that nobody wants to say, but they finally get an outlet for that, and therefore they're popular. If Trump were to take a more moderate approach, yeah, he may still be successful, but he has gained so much popularity by just being the devil's advocate in this sort of way. He's saying all the racist, despicable, xenophobic things that no one is going to say to each other, but that some people have. People believe what he believes, and that's terrifying, but it's the truth. And so I think if Trump were, in the near future, to take a more moderate approach to the way he views things, he would actually lose popularity. Cruz, on the other hand, I don't think he's ever going to become more moderate. I think he actually believes what he says, and that's pretty scary because he seems to be a fairly evil person, at least from my perspective. And as for Clinton, I think people don't like her because of the Benghazi email scandal. They don't like her because of the Benghazi scandal. They don't like her because of the email scandal. They don't like her because she just seems scandalous. And I think people also have a bit of residual hatred for Bill Clinton, and therefore that is being let off upon her. An interesting thing to note in these poll ratings is the fact that Rubio's third with negative 11%. And I think this actually has to do not with most people hating him, but rather with Trump supporters not liking the way he goes at Trump rather than supports him. I think Trump supporters, since they're supporting the most outrageous candidate and they're supporting the candidate with the most vile beliefs, are the most vile people, because you're not going to support a candidate who doesn't say what you're thinking. So they're going after Rubio because they don't like him being so open. They don't like how accepting he is in the way that Trump is very closed-minded and he wants everybody out. He doesn't want outside influence. So going on to the next set of primaries, which are being held March 12th in 2 days. Here's just a little rundown of how things will most likely turn out depending on the winning of different states. So if Trump wins both Florida and Ohio, for these numbers, it's just focusing on Florida and Ohio, he will still be in first with 721 delegates. Cruz will still be in second with 441. Rubio will be at 186, and Kasich will be at 65. So with this potential win, Trump would only need 52% of the remaining delegates to reach the magic number of 1237. So it's really, this primary is going to be hugely important. Well, this set of primaries is going to be hugely important because it really determines the tempo for the next couple of months, where the rest of the primaries are finishing and where we see is Trump going to have the nomination from the Republican side. I'll get more into that in a bit after I go through all these. So if Trump wins Florida but loses Ohio to Kasich, Trump would have 655 delegates, Cruz would have 441, Rubio would have 186, and Kasich would have 131. With that, Trump would actually need 59% rather than 52%. Finally, if Trump loses Florida to Rubio and loses Ohio to Kasich, he will have 556. Cruz will have 441. Rubio will have 285, and Kasich will still have 131. With this, Trump will need 69% of the remaining delegates. So either way, no matter how this turns out for Trump, a win in Florida or a win in Ohio is massively important for him, because the difference between winning those two states versus losing those two states is 17% of the remaining delegates. This would give Trump so much power and leverage over the competition for the rest of this nomination race. And so a question that has been posed numerous times is, will Trump take a more moderate approach in the near future? And if so, will it help him in the polls? As I said earlier, I don't think a more moderate Trump would help him. Now, the question is, do I think it would happen? I think that it very well could happen, depending on how well he does in these next 5 states and even these next 10 states. If he does very well in these next 5, then I don't think he will see any reason to become more moderate and to become more likable in the general public, rather than in his sect of republicanism or the Republican viewpoint. But if he doesn't garner much success from this, I think he's going to try and do his best to become more moderate but still take his extreme approach to certain things in order to gain the popularity that he, first of all, thinks he deserves, and second of all, knows that he needs to win. So to kind of close out this episode, I'm sorry, I don't actually know how long it is. I hope it's not too short, but this was kind of just an introduction and an experimental episode. But to close this out, I just want to say that it's very important to consider the future when it comes to politics. Because in the future, Trump could very well be your president. And in the future, Cruz could be the president, although it's not really likely. In the future, Clinton could be our president. In the future, Bernie could even be our president. So it's important to consider how much we want that future to exist. Do we want Trump to be the leader of our country? Do we want him to take an approach where no outsiders are allowed in, and we need to work together to keep them out? It seems to be a very difficult and dangerous way to approach things. It seems to be an approach that will only lead to negativity within this country. So, as you listen, and as you go through your next few days, I just want you to consider that possibility in that future. Is that something that you want to exist? Because if it isn't, I don't think that you can reasonably side with Trump. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your day.